When I was 12 years old, I lived in a quiet Japanese town where nothing ever seemed to happen. People left their doors unlocked, and children walked home from cram school without their parents worrying. I had a routine. Every evening, I would take a shortcut through the narrow shopping street to get back to my neighborhood. During the day, it was always busy, filled with vendors calling out, people buying groceries, and the smells of food stalls drifting through the air. But by the time I passed through, the shutters were pulled down, the signs flickered dimly, and the entire place felt like a long, echoing tunnel of empty storefronts. Most nights it didn't bother me. It was quiet, sure, but familiar. I knew every bend in the road, every corner, every vending machine. But on one night in late autumn, something about the walk felt different. The rain had just ended, and the ground reflected the neon lights above like a broken mirror. The silence was heavy, almost too heavy, and it struck me how empty everything felt. No footsteps except my own. No passing cars in the distance, not even the faint buzz of cicadas in the trees nearby. It was as though the entire street was holding its breath. It was in that silence that I first felt it. The sensation of being watched. Not the kind of paranoia you shake off after a few steps, but a pressure that grew heavier with every movement I made. My grip on my school bag tightened as I walked faster, but no matter how quickly I moved, I couldn't shake the sense that someone was following close behind, just far enough that I couldn't see them. At the far end of the street, beneath a flickering orange street lamp, I finally saw her, a tall woman in a beige coat, standing perfectly still. Her head hung slightly forward, long black hair covering most of her face. The only thing clearly visible was the surgical mask stretched across her mouth. She didn't shift her weight, she didn't turn her head. She just stood there, rigid, as if she had been waiting the whole time for me to arrive. I froze. My first thought was that she was just another passerby, maybe someone heading home late. But the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. There was nothing natural about how still she was, as though she wasn't breathing. Then I heard it, faint but sharp, the metallic snap of scissors opening and closing, somewhere in the silence. At first I thought I imagined it, but it came again, clearer this time, echoing off the walls of the alley. My stomach twisted as the stories I'd overheard at school rushed back. Whispers of a woman whose mouth had been cut open ear to ear, who hid behind a mask until the moment she revealed the wound. They called her Kuchisake Onna, the Slit-Mouthed Woman. My chest grew tight. The stillness of the air, the way the street seemed longer than usual, the sound of scissors that didn't belong. All of it made me realize that what I was seeing wasn't just someone standing under a light. It was something else. Something that should have stayed in the old stories. I turned and walked faster, my shoes slapping against the wet ground. Every step echoed louder than it should have, bouncing down the narrow alleys. And behind that sound came another, the unmistakable snapping of scissors, steady and patient, following me no matter how far I went. I didn't dare look back, I just kept running. But the streets betrayed me. Corners that should have led to my neighborhood only curved into tighter alleys. Vending machines I'd passed 100 times weren't where they should be. The town I thought I knew had twisted into a maze designed to keep me lost. No matter which way I turned, the sound of scissors followed. Finally, after what felt like hours, I stumbled onto the main road. Traffic passed, lights glowed, and the heavy pressure in my chest seemed to lift. When I turned back, the alley was empty again. Normal, ordinary, like nothing had ever been wrong. But that night never left me. For weeks after, I avoided that street, but it didn't matter. I started seeing her in other places. On the far side of the train platform, standing at the corner of a foggy intersection, always still, always watching, her mask hiding something I never wanted to see. And sometimes, in the silence, I still hear it, that metallic snap, faint but steady. The sound of scissors, a reminder that she hasn't gone anywhere. She's just waiting for me, or for someone else who's foolish enough to walk alone. When I was in high school, I sometimes stayed late at school for extra lessons. By the time I headed home, the streets were nearly empty and the train station was always quiet. I lived in a smaller Japanese town, the kind where the stations weren't busy after dark. You'd hear the loud rush of trains during the day, but at night, only silence filled the platforms. That evening, I arrived just after the last rush of commuters had cleared. The platform was nearly deserted. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly above, casting everything in a pale, unnatural glow. The tracks below glistened with a thin sheen of moisture from earlier rain, and the cool air carried a damp smell of rust and concrete. I remember pulling out my phone, glancing at the time, and realizing how alone I was. Even in the distance, I couldn't see another person. No station attendants, no other passengers, just me, the lights, and the hollow emptiness of a place built for crowds that had already gone home. It should have been peaceful, but something about that silence put me on edge. My footsteps echoed too loudly when I shifted. My breathing sounded too sharp in the still air. And soon, that uneasy silence began to feel less like emptiness, and more like waiting. It started with a sound. At first, I thought it was just the station settling, a pipe clicking or a piece of metal shifting. But then it came again, sharper this time. A dragging, scraping rhythm that didn't fit with anything natural. It wasn't footsteps. It was too uneven, too sharp, almost like something slamming against the floor. The sound carried across the platform, bouncing along the tiled walls. I froze, staring down the long stretch of concrete, and that's when I saw movement. She emerged from the shadows near the far end of the platform, and my brain struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a girl, or at least part of one. Her body ended at the waist, cut clean through, her skin pale and glistening under the lights. Her arms slammed against the concrete, elbows cracking with each movement, dragging her forward at a speed that shouldn't have been possible. Her long black hair streaked behind her, scraping along the ground, leaving faint wet marks wherever it touched. Every slam of her arms sent that horrible rhythm echoing through the station. Tek, tek, tek. The sound was steady, relentless, each movement pulling her closer with unnatural speed. Her eyes locked forward, wide and furious, and the only thing louder than the sound of her body was the pounding of my own heartbeat. I don't remember making the choice to run. My body just reacted, spinning me toward the exit as fast as I could move. My shoes slapped against the floor, echoing down the platform. But no matter how fast I went, the sound behind me grew louder. Tek, tek, tek. It was faster now, desperate. Each slam of her arms against the floor came quicker, closer, closing the distance in bursts of noise that felt like they were right behind me. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the rhythm, the echo bouncing in my ears until I could barely hear my own breathing. I sprinted through the ticket gates, the world outside hitting me in a blur of cold air and silence. The empty road stretched ahead, streetlights casting pale circles of light on the asphalt. I didn't dare stop until my lungs burned and my legs ached. When I finally turned back, the station entrance stood still and quiet, as though nothing had happened. No movement, no sound. Just glass doors reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights. But that night never left me. Sometimes, when I pass train stations after dark, I hear it again. A sharp, broken rhythm echoing faintly, just out of sight. The sound of hands slamming against concrete, dragging something forward. The sound of Teke Teke. When I was in middle school, my town still had an older public park that most people avoided after dark. It had a playground, a row of vending machines, and an old public restroom tucked away near the trees. The building was concrete, with faded tiles and lights that flickered weakly when they worked at all. One night, after walking home late with a friend, I cut through the park alone. By then, the streets were empty, and the park felt even emptier. The swings creaked in the wind, the vending machines buzzed faintly, and the air carried that damp smell of wet earth and rusted metal. That was when I realized I needed to use the restroom. I almost kept walking. The building had a reputation even during the day, but the longer I tried to ignore it, the more uncomfortable I became. I convinced myself it would be quick. The lights inside glowed faintly, and I pushed the heavy door open, stepping into the silence of chipped tile and cracked mirrors. Public restrooms are unsettling at night no matter where you are. The echo of each step, the drip of water from a leaking faucet, the way every sound seems to stretch out too long. But in that particular restroom, the air was heavy, like it didn't want me there. I stepped into one of the stalls and slid the door shut. The latch scraped against metal, echoing louder than it should have. For a moment, everything was still. Just the faint hum of the light above and the quiet drip of water in the distance. Then, without warning, the silence shifted. It wasn't broken by a voice or footsteps, but by something more subtle, a change in the air, as if someone else had entered without sound. The temperature dropped slightly, enough for me to see a faint mist when I exhaled. They say Manto appears in bathrooms just like this one. A masked spirit draped in a red cloak, waiting for someone unlucky enough to be alone. The legend says it offers you a choice: red paper or blue paper. Red means a bloody, violent death. Blue means strangulation, your body drained of air until your face turns blue. But what makes the legend truly terrifying is that there's no correct answer. No matter what you choose, the ending is always the same. Sitting in that stall, I didn't see anything, but I felt it. The weight of a presence leaning close, waiting. I could almost sense the cloak shifting behind the door, brushing against the floor, patient and silent. I unlatched the stall and pushed the door open, my heart hammering so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The restroom was empty, no footsteps, no sound, just the flickering fluorescent light above the cracked mirrors. But as I moved toward the exit, the sense of being watched grew heavier. The mirrors along the wall reflected my movement, but in the corner of one reflection, for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw it. A figure draped in red, face hidden behind a smooth mask, standing impossibly still in the shadows behind me. I stumbled out of the restroom into the cool night air, the park stretching out in silence. The swings no longer creaked. The vending machines no longer buzzed. It was as if the world itself had stopped to listen. For weeks after, I avoided that park completely. But I learned something important. Teke Manto doesn't belong to one restroom or one building. The stories say he can appear anywhere. There are stalls, anywhere you're alone. It's not about the place, it's about the moment when you're most vulnerable. And if you ever feel the air shift, or the lights flicker, or the silence grow too heavy when you're sitting in a restroom stall alone, don't wait for the choice to be offered. Because once you hear the question, it's already too late.